Good afternoon. It's Friday the 13th of March 2026, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Mike Robinson. Joining me by video link today are Patrick Henningsen and Basil Valentine. Later in the programme, Basil's going to be covering the use of British weapons in Iran, and he'll be taking a look at the Mandleson files. Patrick is going to be reporting on the oil panic and also on allegations that X is exposing user data to Israeli intelligence. And I'm going to be reporting on huge job losses as companies roll out the use of AI within their organizations, and also Met Police demands that mobile phone manufacturers capitulate over access to mobile phones. But we're going to begin today with Iran. Now, this is day 14 of the war, and the question of British involvement is one that Charles Mallet has been highlighting over the last couple of weeks. And in an effort to answer that, Charles visited RAF Fairford yesterday, and he has sent us this report.
Having reported on the escalation in Britain's contradictory defensive posture, I set off for RAF Fairford during the small hours of Thursday the 12th of March to find out for the UK column audience what exactly was going on with the United States visiting forces in their use of the airbase. In particular, I wanted to substantiate mainstream media reporting of munitions being loaded onto B-1 bombers, and I wanted to get a sense of what impression, if any, the increased activity had had on the surrounding area and the local population. Viewing the airfield from the north through the coming dawn, there was plenty of evidence of activity, in particular the arrival of an Atlas Air flight, part of the Civil Reserve Air Fleet, moving personnel and equipment for the United States visiting forces, and also the presence of what appeared to be a drone taking up a surveillance overwatch position. Still very much all quiet just on the perimeter of the airfield. It's 6:30 in the morning, just on the outskirts of a village called Marston Maisie, and there's a dead-end track that leads right to the fence, which has been cordoned off with a police road closed sign. And interestingly, whilst out taking a photograph of that sign, a vehicle made its way through the cones, and it turned out to be a chap called Chris, who described himself as being from the press, who's obviously been here quite a bit over the last couple of weeks. And the view that we are so surprised in a way that perhaps we shouldn't be, that nobody seems to care what's going on. I made my way northeast along the track from Marston Maisie. Within just a couple of minutes, several things became clear. First of all, within very easy viewing distance of the fence, there were several B-1B bomber airframes on the tarmac. The second thing to note was how close some of the residential housing was, not just to the perimeter fence of the airfield, but to the aircraft themselves, and I'll go on to explain the significance of that. I'm now on the fence, having gone down the dead-end track from Marston Maisie, and this is what I find. B-1's parked up here. Now, interestingly, I've just had a chat with a photographer who has been coming down here for the last few days, and he's got no dog in the fight, in his own words. He's just here to photograph aircraft, but what was fascinating was to hear him say that last night he was down here at exactly this location, and the Americans drove a load of vehicles up and pointed the headlights towards the fence in order to try to stop people from being able to take effective photographs. So there's no doubt that there is activity going on here, which obviously to me now is completely visible. I mean, I'm standing by the fence. There are no, apart from somebody just under the nose of that aircraft, there's no one around. Of course, what I should absolutely point out is that there are bombs on a carrier just behind that aircraft. Those are GBU-31 Joint Direct Attack Munitions, or JDAMs, which have a £2,000 so-called bunker buster warhead. They're also within 300 metres of residential dwellings, which makes one consider the threat level as described by the security service, who say they have foiled 20 plots by Iranians within the last year, and one has to ask the question, does this sort of activity in such close proximity to residential houses pose a threat that has not yet been described or countered? I worked my way round the fence to the crash gate at Kempsford, where I was able to observe a couple of vehicles that looked like they were providing perimeter security, although on closer inspection 3 out of the 4 personnel were simply sitting in their vehicles on mobile telephones. But in a fairly short space of time, an American military police vehicle arrived, and I moved off, having filmed what I wanted to film, only to find that when I next parked up on a grass verge, I had the flashing lights and the presence of Ministry of Defence Police 4-wheel drive vehicle mounting the curb and blocking my path, whereupon 2 armed constables got out to have a word. Now, it was a very cordial exchange, and they were simply interested in what I was doing. The thing that fell out of it was that it appeared very clear that they had been directed to act by the United States military. The day was not without comedy, because as we were having our exchange and understanding of exactly what it was I was doing, one of them noticed that the tread on my tyre was insufficient for the use of the roads, and I ended up having a police escort into a nearby garage, much to the amusement of those that worked there. There is absolutely no doubt about the level of involvement that we should attribute to the United Kingdom in what is now being described as the US-Israel war against Iran. That would not be happening without the explicit support of not just the British government, but also of Ministry of Defence personnel, both civil and military. A very significant concern is the apparent ability of the United States visiting forces to be able to direct the operational activity of Ministry of Defence police. That is well outside of the bounds of the relationship that should exist between those two organisations. This is Charles Mallett for UK Column at RAF Fairford.
Patrick, I'd be interested to get your thoughts on that, because obviously, as Charles says, the US is absolutely using UK facilities to prosecute this war.
It is, and thank you, Charles, for that report. It's excellent to see that the proof that this is actually happening. But the main point of this, from a strategic point of view, is reports suggest the United States has run out of what they call precision munitions, and Trump himself, the president, has publicly said, "We've run out of targets," and so now they're using bunker busters, using high altitude gravity bombs, bunker busters, to do what? To search for targets? Well, invariably, we know what that's going to lead to. Look at Lebanon, look at Gaza, more civilian casualties. So they're already complaining the intelligence was old. That's why the girls' school got hit. So how good is this so-called targeting intelligence that the U.S. have? Not very good, probably. So this is just a terrible development that is underway.
Indeed. Now, unfortunately, it looks like we've lost Basil. Just before we move on to the next thing, though, I'm going to just mention that Charles will join us in extra to discuss this further. So if you are a UK Column member, then please join us for that. But let's move on then to the question of dual use, because, of course, the question of UK-made weapons being used to destroy, well, in this case, this is the campaign against the arms trade is asking the question, were UK-made weapons reportedly used to destroy girls' primary school in Iran? And in fact, Declassified UK is asking the same question here. But to sort of dive into this a little bit more, I wanted to mention this situation, because this is an Iranian hacktivist group, hackers named Handala. Now, they have posted messages on both the hacked systems themselves, but also on social media, claiming credit for hacking Stryker, which is a leading maker of medical devices. Now, this happened early yesterday morning. Stryker has acknowledged the attack and called it severe when they announced this to employees in emails and so on. Handala say this was partly in retaliation for the US bombing of the girls' school in Iran, which occurred, as we know, on the first day of the war. And their statement said, "We announced to the world that in retaliation for the brutal attack in the Manab school and in response to ongoing cyber assaults on the infrastructure of the Axis of Resistance, our major cyber operation has been executed with complete success. The Zionist-rooted corporation Stryker, one of the key arms of the global Zionist lobby and a central ring in the new Epstein chain, has been struck with an unprecedented blow. In this operation, over 200,000 systems, servers and mobile devices have been wiped and 50 terabytes of critical data has been extracted. A clear warning to all Zionist leaders and their lobbies who hide behind concrete walls and closed windows. The era of Epstein rings and the demons of our time is over." So that was their statement. Now, the attack on a company that's perceived to be providing medical devices to hospitals has gone down like a lead balloon in the West, as we might imagine. There's been significant outrage at an attack on what is perceived to be a civilian target. And this, of course, follows attacks on data centers belonging to Amazon and Microsoft, also argued by some to be crossing the line. But the problem here is that line is now so blurred as to be non-existent. Now, we've mentioned the term dual use many times on the UK Column News, and this is exactly the type of scenario that we've been warning about because as of the last decade or so, dual use is at the heart of British war doctrine, and the same goes for the EU and the United States. Now, to take a couple of quotes from the Starmer regime when they launched the National Security Review and the Defence Review. So if we just have a look at a couple of quotes from this, they said, that a new 11 billion Invest annual budget has been established under the NAD. This will fund kit for our frontline forces, which is affordable and grows our UK industrial base. Our new partnership with industry and a decade of consistently rising defence spending will encourage more private finance to grow our world-leading scale-up and dual-use tech companies. And they also said that today, much of the best innovation is found in the private sector, while the increasing prevalence of dual-use technologies has widened the net of potential suppliers that can contribute to the defence outcomes. So the inevitable outcome of this kind of thinking is that organisations and infrastructure, which until now has been clearly civilian in nature, can no longer be claimed to be so. And so, Patrick, first of all, what are your thoughts on this? Because to my mind, this effectively potentially makes us all a form of human shield.
It does indeed. When we saw, for instance, Iranian retaliation against U.S. positions in the Gulf, they hit data centers, Microsoft, Amazon, all of these companies that are basically openly dual use, as it were. And they're nested within commercial and civilian areas. So they're painting a target effectively. So yes, we all become part of this total warfare strategy, whether we opted in or not. And this is the great danger of mixing these things together. And somehow this doesn't seem to be a problem for our government leaders who are just so quick and busy signing contracts left, right, and center with all of these transnational firms.
Absolutely. Basil, glad to see you're back. What are your thoughts on this? And also what we have here is this report from the National talking about airports being used. And of course, these are civilian airports that they're talking about, and specifically Prestwick.
Yes, that's right, Mike. John Swinney, the First Minister of Scotland, is seeking an urgent meeting with the government to discover the extent to which Prestwick has been used. But even the BBC, using publicly available flight records, have said they've discovered that American heavy bombers were refueling at Prestwick at the end of February on their way to the Middle East to conduct strikes against Iran. And of course, Scotland is also, I believe, the home of the Glenross factory, where components for the Tomahawk are made. So two different ways there that Scotland is certainly against the will of its people contributing to the illegal war on Iran. This, of course, comes on top of a week when a leaked memo came out from the Prime Minister recommending overruling devolved governments, a memo that has been endorsed by Anas Sarwar, the leader of the Scottish Labour Party. So, some considerable friction going on there.
Thanks, Basil. Patrick, let's come to you then and just bring us up to date with the situation with the war itself then.
Well, we're seeing the civilian casualties mount so far. Total number of dead Iranians is past the 1,200 mark, 1,200, according to sources and official records that have been released to the public on that. So, and now you have these major sort of events. Obviously, the rally for the appointing of the new supreme leader, the electing of the new supreme leader, but also Quds Day. This is the Jerusalem or Palestine Day. It's a huge event in Iran, and people came out in the hundreds of thousands. I don't know the numbers exactly, but we have a clip here. And notice on this clip what's happening at the same time as all of these people are out in the streets in the capital. Bombs are dropping, and they seem totally undeterred. It's an extraordinary sight. We've got this if we can roll this clip. I mean, men, women, and children on the street for the Palestinians in Tehran as the bombs are dropping. So that's what the U.S. is up against. So no capitulation there. It's not falling apart. The government's not collapsing. So I guess it hasn't gone to plan so far for the U.S.
Okay, so let's move on then to Trump himself.
Well, this is Donald Trump is, many have cautioned him not to prematurely declare victory. You don't want to have that George W. Bush moment on the aircraft carrier with the mission accomplished banner behind you. But here is Donald Trump doing just that in front of a rally of loyal MAGA supporters. Watch this.
Is that a great name? Well, it's only good if you win. You can only do. And we've won. Let me tell you, we've won. You never like to say too early you won. We won. We won the bet. In the first hour, it was over. But we won. But they gave me a list of names at general. Sir, you can pick the name you'd like, sir. I said, the name of what? The name of the attack on Iran, sir. And they gave me like 20 names. And I'm like falling asleep. I didn't like any of them. Then I see Epic Fury. I said, I like that name. I like that name.
I mean, he's really becoming a parody of himself at this point. So at least there's a few people willing to go to the rallies and laugh at his jokes and cheer for him, because, Mike, the poll numbers don't look very good. If we look at the latest Ipsos poll, we'll bring up on screen here, 27% of Americans approve of Trump's war on Iran. This is the lowest public approval for any war since the Vietnam War. I would say, historically speaking, we're not really in a good place here for this. So whatever Trump believes he can extract in terms of some political capital out of this, it's just baffling, to be quite honest. But the main problem here, Mike, is the Straits of Hormuz have been effectively closed for all intents and purposes. And this is a big problem for the United States. They're talking about, there's a great report up here. This is by Freddie Ponton. This shows all the details of Iran's Navy. It's not a typical Navy in the standard military sense. This is the Basij Navy with tens of thousands of boats and up to 30,000 potential volunteer Marines and naval officers and staff and people working in this. And so there's no way that Trump says they eliminated Iran's navy. It's mathematically impossible. They don't have enough munitions to have destroyed all of the different boats that Iran has. The details of this is a great, well-researched report. We'll put the links for this in the show post here. But they're talking about, the press they're pressing the Trump administration. Are you going to allow U.S. naval boats to escort oil tankers through the Straits of Hormuz? And they're saying, well, we're doing that, we're planning that, but we're not quite ready yet. Not till the end of the month. So, I mean, I want to see how they're going to actually pull this off, if they are able to do it at all. And I'm going to tell you, by the end of March, the pressure on the global economy, on the price of oil, on inflation, especially in the United States, is going to be immense, if what we're seeing right now is any indication this week.
Absolutely, Patrick. But the thing that strikes me is, we've seen the fire on the USS Gerald Ford over the last couple of days, and the question or the discussion about whether that was the result of some kind of attack or whether it was something else. Now, the the War Department in the United States absolutely saying that was a fire in the laundry department. and it was nothing to do with the war. But the fact of the matter is, if they do attempt to run escorts through the Straits of Hormuz, they are simply providing targets, and they're not going to win that.
Yeah, it's just tiny. It's a tiny waterway. We're talking about, 15, 17 kilometers. We're talking about Iran having the high ground. The cliffs there are honeycombed, we're told, with anti-ship missiles as well. And it's only going to take a few shots fired, and we're going to have a complete mayhem on our hands. In, the images of a U.S. frigate with smoke billowing out the top and sinking in the Straits of Hormuz. I can't see that being a very good public relations image for the United States and this president.
Yeah, thanks for that. Now, we're going to come back to oil prices in a second with Patrick, but before we get to that, let's come back to the issue of the United Kingdom and its involvement in this entire conflict. So this is a declassified article headlined "The UK Military and Intelligence Figures Backing Pro-Israel Regime Change in Iran." An array of former British security officials are advising a US-based group that is cheerleading the US-Israel war on Iran as the subhead. Now, the group that they're talking about is United Against Nuclear Iran. It's a US-based neoconservative organization. It has close ties to the United States and Israeli intelligence, and has long advocated for military action in Iran. Its leadership includes Jeb Bush, who is the chair, and Mark Wallace, a former Bush-era ambassador, who's the chief executive. And they have absolutely been supportive of the US-Israeli strikes on Iran. And they called Trump courageous for doing what he's done. Now, the funding of the group is secret. It doesn't disclose its sources. And it's, as I say, consistently backed military action, and so on. So the question is, who is involved? Well, their advisors include, of course, Pete Hegseth. This is the Secretary of State for War. They also include an unnamed senior CIA Iran specialist and Mossad's former Director of Intelligence and Counterterrorism Chief. But the British figures on this include Sir Graham Lamb, the former Director of UK Special Forces and Deputy Commander of US-UK operations in Iraq. Pauline, otherwise known as Baroness Neville Jones, former UK Security Minister and Chair of the Joint Intelligence Committee. Sir Ivor Roberts, former British Ambassador and Foreign Office Head of Counterterrorism. Until his death last year, Field Marshal Charles Guthrie, former UK military chief, and Tom Tugendhat, Conservative MP and former security minister. And Tugendhat's role involves providing what's described as strategic guidance on Iran's strategy. So who else is involved? Well, if we go back to previous advisors, it includes some names that we might know, but Sir Richard Dearlove is one, of course, and another one is Meir Dagan, who is former Israeli intelligence. So Basil, what are your thoughts on this? It is a fantastic report from Declassified, but what are your thoughts on this organisation and the fact that Britain has so many advisors giving it direction?
Well, it's indicative of the extent to which the British establishment is embedded with an aggressive Zionist posture. It's worth pointing out that this group is also advised by Mossad's former Director of Intelligence and Counterterrorism Chief Zohar Palti, while the group's senior advisor, Dror Doron, served for 17 years in Israel's government as a senior analyst in the Prime Minister's office. But the point to make is that as far as I know, and perhaps Patrick can correct me on this, the now murdered Ayatollah Khamenei explicitly stated many times that it was not Iran's intention to produce nuclear weapons because it's against their religion to indiscriminately kill so many civilians. The inevitable consequence of using nuclear weapons, Iran, of course, signed the JCPOA under Barack Obama, which was ripped up by the first Trump administration, and is open to IAEA inspection. Of course, there's another country in the Middle East which has undeclared nuclear weapons. So in a way, this whole UANI thing is a phantom. It's created in order to destroy the Iranian state, not because it's actually concerned about a nuclear Iran, given that the opportunities all the way along until a couple of weeks ago have been for a purely peaceful Iranian nuclear program.
Patrick, this is a good point that Basil makes here, because I'd like to get your thoughts on this report first of all, but also the fact that the UK narrative at the moment seems to be, the Ali Khamenei was, very moderate with respect to nuclear, but his son, the new head of state, is quite the opposite, and they're trying already to persuade us that he is extremely aggressively pro-nuclear.
Yeah, the important thing about this declassified report is you see these pressure groups staffed with Israeli intelligence, staffed with leading Israeli political figures, melded in and blended in with UK and US officials as well, high-profile people. And these pressure groups have always existed. They're working during the JCPOA. This is how Trump attracted the attention of the Israeli lobby during the 2016 presidential campaign, because he came out and spoke and how we're going to tear up the JCPOA. It's a terrible deal. It's a bad deal. Obama's done it, etc. The whole shtick. And why he did that, why Trump withdrew from that deal, is because if that deal was in place, if the Iran nuclear deal that Obama put in place was in place, there would be no pretext for the war that we're seeing right now. They withdrew in order to create the conditions or the excuse to wage war against Iran. That's exactly why it was done. It was done at the insistence of Israel. So, everything beside that is really academic.
Yes, indeed. Well, look, let's come on to the issue of oil prices, and let's bring this on screen because the Trump administration has had to, what have they done? Back down? Is this an acknowledgement that the oil situation is so dire that they've now relaxed the sanctions on the purchase of oil from Russia? I mean, this is something that they said they would never do, Patrick.
Yeah, well, they've done it. The extraordinary thing here, Mike, is that Russia hasn't had to do anything. They've just had to sit back and wait for this situation in the Persian Gulf to continue to deteriorate. So absolutely incredible. And so this is, I think, the pendulum of geopolitics here is now swinging before our eyes. And Donald Trump himself has made this some crazy statements here. I don't know if we have this. This was on Truth Social and X. He's basically saying the United States is the largest oil producer in the world by far. So when prices go up, we make a lot of money, says Trump, make a lot of money. And his number one competition, at least, in the 2028 presidential race on the Democratic side, will be competing against the Republicans, is Gavin Newsom. This is his response. Who's the we, says Newsom, making, quote, a lot of money from skyrocketing gas prices, Donald Trump. It's definitely not the Americans struggling to pay the extra $1.5 billion at the pump this week. And prices in California right now, Southern California, we're looking at $5.40 per gallon. That's for unleaded. The Southwest states where I'm at, slightly cheaper, between $4.30 and $4.50 in Arizona right now this week. And in the East Coast, much cheaper because, of course, the supply chains are much more buoyant and easy to get to the pump on the East Coast, so it's much cheaper, relatively speaking. Nonetheless, it's going in this direction. So, and we have this announcement this week. Everyone knew this was coming, $100 per barrel. There's so much pressure coming from the futures market on this. So the more we see reports that the straits are closed, the more you're going to see this upward pressure from the oil futures market here. On this situation. So what's that going to mean in terms of the U.S.? Lots of inflation. So there's been a lot of lobbying to basically free up the oil reserves, the strategic reserves of these different countries here. The International Energy Agency has agreed to release 400 million barrels of oil to address this short supply in the market. Now, listen, this is being hailed in the U.S. as some great victory, okay? 400 million barrels of oil. If we run the numbers on this, the shortfall from the closure of the Straits of Hormuz is approximately 8 million barrels per day. So really what you're talking about there is a 50-day supply of strategic reserves from many different countries. So you have a situation after 50 days, all these countries will have depleted their strategic oil reserves, and there's no guarantee. We don't know how long this crisis is going to last, based on conflicting statements coming out of the White House on this. So it's a debacle in the making, and it's going to mean we're going to have severe economic shocks and repercussions from this here. But again, we'll go back to the Times of India here. U.S. waiver puts 19 million barrels of Russian oil back onto the market for India. So a lot of pressure has been put in the last year on India to stop buying Russian oil. And as you know, they're mixing the different oil products and doing sort of ghost shipments there with Russian oil. And India was heavily pressured by the U.S. tariff threats by Trump, et cetera. So now all of a sudden, it's the market's back open for Russian oil in India. So India and these countries like India, South Korea, Japan, China, they all rely on the Persian Gulf for a large percentage, if not the majority, of their oil. And not only that, we also have the LNG issue from Qatar. That's hitting the European prices on this in terms of supply shortages. But guess who's got a bumper market, Mike, for overpriced LNG into Europe? Well, the United States of America. So that's Trump's base, big oil, big gas. They're very happy about all of this, but everybody else is going to be suffering. Russia's also doing very well. They're going to meet their balance of payments now, probably over the next couple of months.
Indeed. And of course, as you say, it's going to be the rest of us that suffer from this, because inflation is coming. And it's not just, Patrick, it's not just oil prices. That's, of course, a massive input cost into just about every area of the economy. But if we look at the futures prices on fertilizer, for example, this is going to be a massive input cost increase on the cost of food production. And of course, farmers aren't going to get the prices that they need to cover the cost of that fertilizer. So we're going to see even more pressure on the farming industry, which is probably why we're seeing the Food Standards Agency in the UK lauding factory-grown food and insects today. They've just released a new report. So this is going to be massive for everybody's pockets in the not-too-distant future.
Well, I guess ASDA can start restocking the cricket flour shelves after that whole product line failed over the last couple of years. Absolutely wonderful. So not only food prices, Mike, inflation, but food shortages as a result of that. So this is serious, and we don't see any serious commentary coming from our political leaders on this issue. Why is that? Complete silence, or complete crickets, no pun intended.
I think the pun was intended, but okay, well done. And but let's move on then to the question of false flag, because this is something that we've been talking about since this conflict began. What's the latest?
Well, here's all the rage. This is just a typical report here from The Blaze, Glenn Beck's media outlet. So they're all talking about sleeper cells. Sleeper cells in America. This is dominating the headlines on Fox and other networks in America. Leaked intelligence warns of Iran's potential revenge plot, unleashing terror on U.S. soil. So there's so many of these, and there's the crazy ones are coming over the Mexican border, Iranian operations and cells coming there as well. So it just gets crazier and crazier. But here's where the main one, and this was run by the New York Post, was front running this. This story is absolutely incredible. So top U.S. drone expert says Iran could make deadly California strike any moment. Now I'm looking at this, Mike, and I'm like, where is this coming from? This is from a special report from the FBI. But if you actually look at the details of this, and we'll bring this back up on screen here, and what are they saying here? Well, they're saying that recently acquired information that as of early February 2026, Iran is allegedly aspired to conduct surprise attacks or revenge attacks. But wait a minute, this predates the actual war. The war broke out on February 28th, if I'm not mistaken. So they're talking about prior to that. So this thing does not add up whatsoever. And a lot of the problems with the intelligence right now with the U.S. is they're being exclusively fed and stovepiped intelligence from Israelis. The Israeli intelligence are flooding the zone of the U.S. DHS and also in the FBI. And you wonder why you have all these absolutely rabid pro-Zionist, pro-Israeli Homeland Security secretaries. Why would the Israeli lobby be so interested in being in hand-picked Homeland Security? As Kristi Noem got sacked, and you've got the new Homeland Security, which they plucked out of Congress, who has been groomed by the Israeli lobby since he came into office. So, and then you see reports like this popping up. It really should be no coincidence here. And so we're saying, is this a false flag? It certainly looks like some kind of a bogus potential plot. And if anything, the fear value in America will probably do the job on its own without even having to launch these mysterious drone attacks in California. I mean, what on earth, how, why? But what's in Southern California but the largest Iranian diaspora community and pro-monarchist community happened to be in Los Angeles. So I suppose that doesn't have anything to do with this. I'm joking actually, but anyway. So on from there, we have this report, which you can marry up to the previous report. The U.S. Army, some drones have been stolen from Fort Campbell in Kentucky. How is that possible? They're offering up a giant reward, Mike, of $5,000 for information of 4 stolen drones. I mean, how could something like that go missing from a secure facility? It's weird. So does this have anything to do with the previous story? We're just lining these up and joining the dots. Maybe we're just being paranoid here, Mike, and there's nothing really to see. We should just move along, I guess.
Well, we could move along. Let's move along to this then, because the rhetoric from Trump just gets stronger and stronger, I suppose, and it even brings the world of sport in. So the question is Iran going to be welcome at the World Cup? And Trump is saying the Iran national soccer team is welcome to the World Cup, but I really don't believe it's appropriate that they be there for their own life and safety. Thank you for your attention in this matter. That's clearly a direct threat, Patrick.
So the president of the country that's hosting the World Cup is threatening a team that qualified for the World Cup after launching an unprovoked, undeclared war of aggression against that country. Maybe we should think about sanctioning the United States. I mean, just imagine, Russia seems to be off the hook now. And why not move the U.S. into that frame? And they should be banned from all international sporting competitions. I don't know. It's just an idea.
Basil, in the past, you have been 21st Century Wire sporting correspondent. So what are your thoughts on this?
Well, the World Cup, is supposed to be a joyful occasion where politics is put aside and the nations of our world come together in a spirit of fair competition and fans from different parts of the world all mixing and getting to know each other. So, I think it actually can be a good thing. It also, of course, to some extent, reinforces the whole idea of the nation state and pride in one's own country, something that the globalists are always keen to denigrate. But with respect to Iran, they've qualified for the competition, therefore they're fully entitled to be there. There's also speculation that some other countries might boycott the event because of the illegal attack on Iran. Imagine for a moment it was being held in Russia. As we know, every time Russia's special military operation is mentioned in the UK media, it's always described as unprovoked and illegal. This war is unprovoked and illegal. If the World Cup was in Russia this year, there would be a whole host of defections, of boycotts. But of course, the United States is different, isn't it? Particularly when acting on Israel's behalf. But we could yet see some boycotts. And I hate to have to say it, but in a way, I hope so.
Yes, indeed. Thank you, Basil. Okay, let's move on then. And well, if you like what the UK column does, we do need your ongoing support. So please have a look at the website, have a look at the options for helping us financially. Thank you very much to everybody that is a member or is making a monthly donation or a donation of any kind. If you can't support us financially, please do share this program and everything else that you see that you like, because that helps us get round the censorship regime that we're all facing. And now tonight at 7 p.m, Charles and I are speaking to Jerm as usual. The title of the program tonight is Finding Beauty in Living Authentically. So join us at 7 p.m. for that. And then the third part of 1,000 Words podcast, Jake is painting Doc Malik, of course. The third part of that is for members only. That's on Sunday at 7 p.m. Do join us at 7 on Sunday for that as well. Now, on Wednesday, we mentioned that the Mandleson files were supposed to be released at 12:30, that they had not been. There was supposed to be a statement in the House. They were eventually released later in the day. And so we now have seen that they are pretty much nothing to get excited about. There really was nothing terribly surprising or unusual in those. But Basil, what are your thoughts on what's been happening around that whole issue?
Oh, what a tangled web we weave when first we practice to deceive, is, of course, a famous proverb from Sir Walter Scott's epic poem Marmion. And all the way back in 1808, he might have had Keir Starmer in mind. Were there any standards in public life these days, or indeed a ready-made alternative to the Prime Minister from within the ranks of the Parliamentary Labour Party, then he might well be gone by now. Following the revelations earlier this week, then he knew more than he originally admitted about the Peter Mandleson situation, and indeed he may have misled the House of Commons. The leader of the Green Party has said that the files confirm Mandelson's malign influence run through this Labour government. Starmer knew exactly the choice he was making when he appointed him. He has to go. That call has been echoed by the Scottish Labour leader Anna Sarwar and numerous other politicians. Starmer says the documents show what was known about the relationship with convicted sex offender Jeffrey Epstein at the time of his appointment, and that it, quote, led to further questions being asked. But the Prime Minister said the exchange cannot be published yet, as it forms part of the police investigation. Starmer could suffer further ministerial and administration resignations when the WhatsApp messages are published in the next tranche of Peter Mandelson files, according to senior government sources. Speaking to The Guardian, officials are bracing themselves for these upcoming releases, which are expected to include informal communications alongside the formal messages like those in the first batch. Starmer, of course, apologised again yesterday over his handling of the appointment, saying it was me that made a mistake and it's me that makes the apology to the victims of Jeffrey Epstein, and I do that. But of course, he hasn't apologised to the British people for making the appointment in the first place. We're still waiting for that. The disclosures of the WhatsApp messages are going to be examined by the Intelligence and Security Committee of MPs and peers, which will then judge which are safe to release on national security grounds. So we can expect some heavy redactions at that point in a way that, of course, mirrors the redactions in the Epstein files themselves. So the question we have to ask as well is, out of a population of 60 million plus or whatever, why was it deemed necessary to home in on someone, Peter Mandleson, known to carry such a massive reputational risk? And the answer, of course, lies in Mandelson's key roles in both Labour Together and his now defunct consultancy, Global Counsel, which counted Palantir amongst their former clients. Now, Labour MP Ian Byrne got to the heart of the crisis in the Commons this week when he identified the clique at the top of the party and called on the Prime Minister and the General Secretary to launch an independent investigation into Labour Together. Well, good luck with that, Ian. Also in the Commons this week, Norwich Labour MP Clive Lewis said the appointment reflected a wider rotten political culture, a 30-year project where proximity to wealth and power isn't a means to an end, it is the end goal. That's what Peter Mandleson represented. And the secretary of the campaign group of Labour MPs, Richard Burgon, asked how Mandleson was even considered for the Washington job. It is because it suited the interests of a tiny faction in the Labour Party, he said, funded by big business, which wanted Mandleson at the heart of things in order to shift a Labour government away from the agenda that a real Labour government should have. And that, of course, is exactly what's happened. It's worth remembering that Starmer was talking about renationalising the water boards before coming to power and has long since booted that idea into touch. Burgon went on, that is why Mandleson was popular with these people, and that's why, despite his despicable character, despite his greed and avarice, he was put in that position. Now, speaking of Mandelson's avarice, Cabinet Office Minister Thomas Simons told Sky News yesterday, you can look at the documents, you can see on a value for money basis why the decision was made to pay Mandleson £75,000 as a settlement. Mandleson had originally requested £547,000. That's his contract being paid up in full. And he went on to add that there was a risk of an employment tribunal, that Mandleson had made veiled threats to take the government to an employment tribunal. I mean, it sounds incredible when you think about it, doesn't it? Mandleson has apparently denied intending to go down that route. Thomas Simons himself expressed moral outrage over the payment and called for the money to be donated to a victims' charity. Well, watch this space, as they say, if you think Mandelson's going to hand the 75 grand over. Meanwhile, of course, one of Mandelson's former clients, Palantir, has come under renewed pressure, this time from medical charity MedAct, which says that Palantir's NHS contract opens the door to Big Brother-style data sharing that Reform UK might use for a version of US immigration raids. Their report, published yesterday, is backed by doctors, lawyers, patients and human rights groups from the No Palantir in the NHS campaign and has been sent to hospital trusts and integrated care boards nationwide. It was shared with The Guardian and the BMG. Of course, Palantir, the data analytics company founded by Peter Thiel and Alex Karp, both of whom are known to Epstein, I believe, won a £330 million NHS contract to deliver the Federated Data Platform. The UK government is urging health bodies to adopt this platform, which the Health Secretary, Wes Streeting, says will ensure the NHS is brought into the digital age. But if you're like me and you'd like to see all Palantir government contracts cancelled, then there is a petition online, and I think we've got the slide for that. 38 degrees. Stop Palantir taking over our public services. And if you haven't signed that already, I would urge you to do so.
Basil, thank you very much for that. Now, let's just move on to the issue of job losses in AI. And well, here we've got an announcement from Atlassian. This is an important update to our team, apparently, because Atlassian, the tech company, is going to fire 1,600 employees. In fact, they already have done that because of their desire to invest in artificial intelligence. They are not the only organization to have announced this. Oracle has announced already, the figure that I heard a few days ago was 30,000. Others are suggesting it could be as high as 45,000 job losses as they they're saying that this is in order to allow them to have the money to invest in AI for the next stage of their AI rollout. And Jack Dorsey's company Block, his company since he sold Twitter to Elon Musk, has also decided that it is going to cut jobs in order to invest in AI, apparently. So what are the AI companies saying about this? Well, here's Sam Altman, who's accusing these corporations of, or these, I suppose they're not much more than startups, really. But anyway, they employ lots of people. Oracle is not a startup, of course, but they're accusing them of AI washing. So in other words, using AI as the excuse for making layoffs that they otherwise would have made, but which would have perhaps have gone down very badly with their various investors and so on. So they're using AI as the mechanism that they can get away with the potential, or at least turn the potential negative into a positive as far as the investors themselves are concerned. So watch this space, because I believe that over the next year or two, we're going to see a much greater degree of firings as a result of the rollout of AI, if we allow it to go that way, because this is, every company is of this type is desirous to remove themselves of the obligations that they have under the various employment legislations in various parts of the world. So they'd be delighted to hand that over to AI where they can. We'll see where that goes. I think they're going to massively overreach and find themselves in a bit of difficulty. But Patrick, let's come back to, since we've mentioned Elon Musk and X just a second ago, what have they been up to with respect to Israel?
Well, but AI washing by Sam Altman is extraordinary. AI is giving AI a bad name, Mike. It's absolutely tragic. So this is a story that caught a lot some people's attention, but not enough. And this is one of the best tech reports on this story and luckily we have published this at 21stcenturywire.com. Again, great work by Freddie Ponton. Musk and the verification trap, exposing X users to Israeli intelligence. Now, this is not a hyperbolic headline. If you look at the details of what happened here, it's extraordinary. Now, this was brought to the attention of Elon Musk at the time that why is he using an Israeli company linked to Israeli intelligence to do all of the biometric and ID verifications for X users? Why? And Musk's strange relationship with Authentics, a shadowy Israeli identity verification company whose administrative credentials sat exposed on a public Telegram channel for over a year. At the same time, X continued to mandate biometric data submission to this already compromised system. I mean, this is just unbelievable. So if people knew, Mike, and so the question is, what did Elon Musk know and when did he know it? Because this is at least corporate negligence, and maybe worse, in fact. But the fact that he's so tightly wound with the state of Israel, with Benjamin Netanyahu, having to do the sort of, struggle session that he was pulled in to do after October 7th, and also to visit Auschwitz with Jewish leaders and so forth. That was all going on at the same time as this. And we'll bring this back up again. According to the cybersecurity firm Spider Silk and 404 media outlet, good media outlet, by the way, 404 for these types of stories, the chief security officer at Spider Silk discovered that exposed credentials belonging to the Authentics Network Operations Center had been harvested by Redline Infostellar malware in December 2022 and posted on the Telegram channel, where they remained for a year. So what happened was, rather than address this story after the fact, Musk was just aloof, pretended to be aloof, totally avoided talking about it, and then quietly did a shift later to switch the identity verification job, if you will, to Stripe. Okay. Now, why did he even use this Authentics when users brought it to his attention and was kind of an uproar early on? And this was a time when Twitter became X. Okay, right around the same time when they did the rebrand. So, I mean, what is going on here? I mean, to me, Mike, this is extraordinary. I'd like to know your thoughts on it. But the links to Israeli intelligence in this firm, it's staffed with 8,200 veterans, basically.
Well, that is the key point, Patrick, because the problem is that as we're seeing this massive rollout of age verification right across the world, originally, if you remember, driven by the Online Safety Act, but this is something that there's a bandwagon that everybody has jumped on. They are, Unit 8200 spawned venture capital funded companies are right at the heart of this. And we've got such a spread of them right across the tech industry that it's practically impossible to not be using one of these types of companies. Unit 8200, intelligence agency equivalent to the National Security Agency or GCHQ, except that they openly admit to being offensive cyber war experts as well as being defensive. Allegedly, that the NSA and GCHQ might say that they are. But anyway, the point is they run an alumni network very similar to the type of thing that we've seen from other organizations like Common Purpose on a civilian level. But when you've got an alumni network operating that's setting up and spawning tech startups in Silicon Valley and other parts of the world, and have effectively taken over the entire Western internet, this is a problem, and it's something that I think people just have no awareness of. And so we like to see these types of exposures, exposés of these types of situations as often as we can.
Mike, there's one more aspect of this, one that you need to realize as well. Think of all the pro-Palestinian activists. Think of the people who live in Gaza or who live in the West Bank, or just internationally, journalists, people like that, who support the Palestinian cause or are critical of Israel. At some point in this story that we've just showed you, all of their home addresses, their driving license, passports, biometric data is potentially being handled by a firm based in Israel and that are staffed with Israeli intelligence veterans. Or, former. Are they former? Are they present? Is there a difference at this point? Because we've made the same argument with all the CIA and NSA people that are staffing Meta and staffing Google and so forth. So that should concern people, especially since the Israeli intelligence are using this type of profiling to target journalists in occupied Palestine and possibly in Lebanon as well. So extend that, globally. On this. That's basically what Elon Musk has opened up his user base to. I mean, the potential here for lawsuits is also quite massive. So maybe that's why he's avoiding talking about this in public.
Indeed. No doubt we'll be talking about that in a couple of minutes. But let's just end with this story then, because Metropolitan Police has pushed out a press release. Now, this is citing the head of the Metropolitan Police, Mark Rowley, who some are describing as having thrown down the gauntlet to mobile phone industry. And this is all about taking action over stolen mobile phones. Now, over the last year or so, a couple of years, we have been seeing press coverage on the BBC and mainstream media showing video footage of mobile phones being stolen by children or young people on scooters and so on, and it's become a really big talking point over the last couple of years, and now we're beginning to understand why. Now he is claiming that phone companies are leaving customers at risk until they take action to make stolen devices quotes unusable bricks, and he's talking about giving them a deadline of the 1st of July, and if they haven't done this by then, he will be asking the Home Office to legislate to force them to do this. Now, he was making these comments at the phone crime conference in London, and he claims that he doesn't understand why tech giants haven't done more. So let's just have a look at the quote from him here. He said that while stolen phones remain valuable, this market will continue. Only manufacturers and operating systems can break this model at source. If by the end of June, industry has not come forward in a genuinely serious solutions-focused way with concrete commitments that make stolen phones unusable anywhere in the world, the Met will formally ask the government to legislate. But look, this is bad for us all for a number of reasons, and it's got nothing to do with keeping us all safe from having our phones stolen. This is building what's effectively a legally mandated, or certainly he wants it to be a legally mandated, remote kill switch on every phone sold in the United Kingdom. It's going to grant the state the technical capability to disable personal communications at any time. The same infrastructure that bricks a stolen phone could, in principle, be misused by authorities or demanded under legislation like the Investigatory Powers Act for other purposes. And he said that for bricking after a theft, he's expecting that to be done within 90 minutes. But there'll be no due process. There's no independent verification of that step before a device would be permanently disabled. And in the current environment, we've got to ask what the risks are in this. And so I think this is something that should concern us all, aside from the fact that what this would actually do is prevent any put all the independent repair businesses out there out of business immediately, because one of the things that they're absolutely requiring is that only any repairs or any changes done to the system itself of a mobile phone would have to be done by the manufacturer, and that each chip would be actually coded to the specific device. So there's lots to talk about around this, but it is in the legislative environment that we're in at the moment, this is a dangerous slippery slope to be joining, and we'll talk more about this in extra as well. But look, we've got to leave it there for today. I want to say thank you very much to Basil and to Patrick for contributions today, and to everybody that's been watching. Stay with us if you're a UK Column member. Charles will be joining in extra to talk more about his experiences at RAF Fairford yesterday, and otherwise don't forget Germ tonight at 7. 1000 Words podcast at 7 on Sunday, and we'll see you 1 p.m. as usual on Monday for another UK Column News. See you then. Have a great weekend. Bye-bye.